Hello, listeners and viewers. Welcome to the new season of Architects of Great Talent, a podcast by Careernet Group. I am your host, Neelabh Shukla. In this episode of the new season, let's discuss the code to crack the job interviews. We have been joined today by Ms Priyadarshini Prabhu, People Director at Moss Adams India. Moss Adams is among the top 15 public accounting firms in the US, offering assurance, tax, and advisory services to the clients in the US. Moss Adams India was set up in Bangalore in 2021 in line with firm's strategy of globalizing the workforce and enhancing the operational structure. Ms Priyadarshini oversees the talent strategy at Moss Adams India and is responsible for driving the talent development and enhancing the people experiences. So welcome, Priya.
Thank you, Neela. Pleasure being here.
So Priya, you have over 2 decades of experience in the HR field. You have worked at renowned organizations such as Infosys, TE Connectivity, Novo Nordisk, and Eli Lilly. We'll be glad to hear about your journey.
Thank you so much. I would say that, I've been fortunate enough to be part of organizations which have provided me the platform, A, to showcase my skills, and B, also have the honor of working with some wonderful managers. But more importantly, and this is something that I keep telling a lot of people that I meet, I've been able to live by the mantra of saying yes to the experience. So a lot of the experiences I've had in each of the firms is I would raise my hand and say, yes, I'm going to do it. And in that learning came a lot of my shared and my lived experiences, which I think has contributed to my journey as an HR professional. So I'll talk a little bit about my first job as a campus recruiter in Infosys. Got a chance to travel the length and breadth of this country, wonderful country of ours, and then had the opportunity to go outside, hire for Infosys in UK, in Germany, in the US, and really understand what it takes to build an employer brand outside of the country. Very soon moving from there on to a firm called Novo Nordisk really gave me a good sense of how to work in a culture different from the typical American and UK markets, the Nordic cultures, a deep understanding of learning and development as a function, organization development, culture building. I think that has been really instrumental in forming me as an full-rounded HR professional. Coming to Eli Lilly and TE Connectivity, been part of the growth journeys from when they were small to really, the capability builds. So I think those have been instrumental in also laying a very good foundation. Throughout my career, right from the employee life cycle of hire to retire, be it recruiting, learning, development, engagement, rewards, exits even, the fact that I've got those experiences in each of these fields have really helped sort of prepare me for the real world, so to say.
Given 2 decades of experience, what parts or what keeps you most motivated about the human resources function?
Great. The first thing I'd like to say is, firstly, human is not just a resource, right? That's why in Moss Adams, we call the human resources function as a people team, because ultimately we're dealing with people. And to tell you the truth, that's what really inspires me. The kind of people that I meet, different people, different perspectives, different thoughts. To tell you the truth, during COVID years, it was really hard for me to work from home because I was missing that energy that I get from people. So if you ask me, plain and simple, it's the people that motivate me, it's the people that inspire me, as cliche as it sounds.
Completely agree, Priya. Even I would agree that given that the function we represent, people are the center of the universe as far as this function is concerned. And that's a big perk of being in this field. You do something which you really enjoy doing. So Priya, our topic for today is the code to crack job interviews. Let me start by asking, how did you prepare for the first interview of yours?
Right. Thank you for that question, because I think it's a very important question to ask. Everybody's experience is different of preparation for a job interview, but there are certain things I think that will serve us well. As we set foot in terms of what should we talk about, what should we learn about. The first thing is, if the person has had any project experience or internship experience, I think it'll be good to talk about that. So when I prepared for my interview, I was looking at what were the project work I did as part of my B School curriculum and how I can showcase that. That was number one. Second thing is about practicing your answers. Sometimes I feel these days, because of maybe over 2,000 interviews I've taken, when you take those interviews, you realize what not to do more than what to do, right? So practicing your answers is a very, very good way. So I remember a day before my interview, I was practicing my answers. In those days, we didn't have mobile phones which recorded. So in front of the mirror and saying, okay, this is how I sound when I'm answering a question like this. And the third thing is some amount of research, meaning, okay, if it is a firm that you're applying to, what does the firm's financials look like? What has been their growth story? How many employees? What is the value proposition that the firm has? I think these lend itself well to actually showing preparedness for the interview and shows the interviewer that you're actually interested in the job.
Great. So Priya, walking down the memory lane, was there any fear at that time when you were going to appear for the interview?
I think that's such a pertinent question, Neelabh, because there's a lot of fears that, as a first-time interviewee, people have, and I'm no different. The first thing I was worried about is that I would be over-explaining stuff, because that is something, as a new interviewer, you sort of tend to ramble on, like, okay, I want to explain myself, and then I want to explain some more, and then I want to explain some more. So that was the biggest fear, that I didn't want to do that. Second, and this is important to me as a personal value, is that I don't want to come across as being too fake. So meaning I want to be coming across as being authentic, as being sincere, as genuinely wanting the job, right? So these were my two biggest fears. I didn't want to be sounding insincere or just put on a mask and say, be an ideal candidate, because really you and I know there is no concept of ideal candidate. Basically, a person can just be the best version of what they can be, right? So that differs from person to person. So those were my two biggest fears, this over-explaining bit and the fact that I come across as being inauthentic.
Perfect. So be authentic, and be a good listener.
Absolutely.
I guess are the two key aspects.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. And Priya, 2 decades down the line, you have been other side of the table on countless number of times now.
Yeah.
Is there a fear as an interviewer today as to when you are going to interview somebody?
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head in the way you summarized, because the active listening part, right, is so important. Sometimes today my fear is candidates don't listen to the question. Right? I'll give you an example. So I was asking a candidate, can you give me an example of a time where you handled a conflict? And so the candidate spent the next 25 minutes answering a question about how they worked on a project and what was their role in it. Do you see so we were talking about a specific situation and the candidate was giving me an answer which was nowhere related to the question. So that is my biggest fear, that if people don't listen to the question, then there is a chance that you may miss the point altogether.
Agree completely, Priya. Yeah. So Priya, deep diving further, what are the other common mistakes the interviewees end up making, especially if they are the first time interviewees?
There are about 2 or 3 common mistakes that candidates make. First thing is not planning enough to arrive on time if it's an in-person interview or even if it's a virtual interview. Showing up is the first impression. And there's a book called Blink which says the first impressions are made in the first 3 seconds of meeting somebody, right? So it is that important in a job interview. So not showing up on time and saying, okay, Bangalore traffic is becoming a stale answer. So plan ahead. You know that you have to be somewhere which is, like Outer Ring Road. So you'll have to leave a little bit earlier if you want to actually go and, meet that person. So showing up on time. I think sometimes candidates take that too lightly, right? That's number 1. 2 is lack of depth in the preparation for the role, which means I haven't seen the job description, I don't know what the role is, or what does your company do? Asking that question in an interview shows complete lack of preparedness, and it almost makes it too casual, right? The person is not really interested in that job. And third thing is being very focused on speaking about their experience in the prior firms. So I've had interviews of candidates where the candidates have come and told me, I hate my boss, I think that company is not a very good firm. That really is showcasing your experience in a poor light, and that doesn't show strength of character from a candidate's perspective. So for me, those are common mistakes, and I often consider them as red flags when I interview for a particular role.
So I think two key aspects. One is enough research.
Yeah.
You need to know whom you are meeting, why you are meeting,
Right.
where you are going, and reaching up on time are two of the most critical aspects.
Absolutely. A simple hack for the candidates, I would say, is if you know who your interviewers are, look them up on LinkedIn, figure out what their experiences have been like. If possible, reach out and in your network to find out what that firm that you're interviewing for has to offer. How would your skill sets fit in with the firm's offering? So I think that would be a great way to prepare for any first-time interviewer.
Makes sense, Priya. Priya, another very common questions we usually get asked is around what adds more value to me? Are these additional certifications in addition to the formal degree I have? Or these are practical experiences with respect to projects or internships and things like that? What's your take on that?
There are no shortcuts to experiences, as much as we'd like to believe that. Certifications are important, but they help you cross the screening criteria. They don't help you get the job, right? So if I'm looking for a project manager, yes, I need a PMP certification. Yeah, but I will not hire a person just on the basis of certification. I will want to have a conversation and see in which firms have they actually led and developed and taken a project to closure. So certifications are very important in so far as upskilling is concerned, right? Because you and I know that the market today is dynamic and things are changing earlier we'd say every 5 years. Today it's every year things are changing. So how do we keep ourselves upskilled? And for that, I think certifications become very, very important. For me, the certification is an enabler. It is not the decider of whether a person will get the job or not. It is serving mostly as a screening criteria as and when we look for candidates, suitable candidates to hire for a particular position.
So Priya, another question for candidates when they are preparing for interviews. How should they be preparing smartly? Instead of just rehearsing a set of answers, what are some of the best approaches?
So one thing I will say that confidence doesn't overshadow competence. Meaning, it is important that the person shows competence for the role. So just rambling on and showing overconfidence doesn't really help. Right? So be confident, but it's a thin line between confidence and overconfidence, right? So be confident, but more importantly, be competent. Competency is very, very important, meaning you have to have some subject matter expertise in your or understanding in your experience and in your role itself. So how are you going to showcase that? The second thing, and I don't think we do this nearly enough in our market, is reaching out to a trusted group of your professional acquaintances or colleagues, or a senior from college, or somebody you have met who's working in the firm, to get a sense for what the firm is about, to get a sense for what the role is about. Oftentimes people come to the interview and say, when we ask them, do you know anybody here? They're like, yes, I know, but I have not reached out to them. So proactive reaching out really gives the interviewer also the impression that the person is actually interested in the job, right? The third part, understand the role. Today, you and I know there are a lot of fancy titles and designations out there in the market. So right from coming up with, one of the jokes I had was I heard a role called Associate Lead Analyst 2. Now, if somebody were to give me this role, Neelabh, I would be like, what does this role actually do? When I read the title, I was like, Associate Lead Analyst 2. So I think the candidate is well within their purview to actually ask what the role is, so that they can prepare accordingly. There is something called a tailoring approach, which is basically how do you tailor your responses or resume or discussions basis what the firm wants. So for example, if I were to apply for a job in your firm as a recruitment consultant, I know that I have to meet a particular list of criteria, and therefore I will showcase my recruiting experience, my sourcing experience, my scheduling experience, versus if I were to apply for a learning job where I'll have to showcase my learning experience, right? So that's the tailoring approach, which means how do you tailor your resume or you tailor your responses in order to meet the criteria that the firm has. So that I think candidates have to be super smart about. Third and most importantly, don't guesstimate the answers. If you don't know, say you don't know. Right? Because it's a very thin line from digging a hole which is deeper when you just go on with not knowing the answer and take a guess, right? In the hustle culture that we have today, people say, okay, confidence is king or confidence is queen, but it's not at the cost of the real-time knowledge that you need to have or need to possess with respect to the role. So don't guesstimate answers. Say you don't know when you don't know. I think that for me shows integrity. That for me shows character.
I agree completely, Priya. Especially saying no when you don't know.
Yeah.
I think one of those key aspects somebody should learn and should know when to draw that line.
Absolutely.
Priya, you also touched upon this point of leaning towards the known network when you are researching, when you are going to meet someone. Over a period of time, concepts like mentoring, coaching, mock interviews, they are starting to become mainstream now.
That's true.
So there are professional help available, avenues available to go through these things. What's your view? Are these important?
Any tool or any platform that helps you become more efficient is important. Let's put it that way. But it's also up to the interest and the aspiration level of the candidate, right? Mock interviews are an excellent way of preparing oneself for the real world. In fact, in some of the campuses that we go to, we have a plan in Moss Adams to actually offer some interviewing skills as an approach so that people are ready, campus hires are ready. Right? And in some of my previous firms as well, we've looked at how can we up the ante in terms of efficiency in interviewing. Specifically going back to the point on active listening, I think this comes up a lot. More importantly, today there are so many virtual tools available that can actually help and assess how you're doing. In fact, one of the tools that I actually partaked in, it was an AI-based tool where they capture your responses during an interview and assess you on how you performed in the interview and give you some real-time feedback. Now, this is the future, Neelabh. So I think candidates today are going to be much more prepared than you and I were when we first interviewed. But having said that, these opportunities need to be harnessed, right? More importantly, and I've spoken about coaching and mentoring quite a lot, and I think it's something that in our culture we do very well. You know, we come from a culture which had a guru shishya parampara, right? Which means that a lot of learning happened by learning from others or learning from a person who's smarter than you, or who has more lived experiences than you. So my submission to all candidates looking for a job would be to reach out in their known networks. Sometimes it does happen that you don't know anybody in that firm or you don't have a known network, but I believe that every person should have their personal board of directors, what I call, meaning what will that person say about you if you're not in the room? So when people say, I have to form connects or network in a firm, people seem to think it's only about that short-term networking, but this is really about a long-term gain. That's why we say in India, like, you don't want to burn your bridges before you move on to a next firm, because you're going to meet some of these people on your journey there. So that coaching and mentoring from your trusted, maybe your first manager, maybe you still speak to your first manager and say, hey, I have a question, can you guide me, right? That for me is a great mentorship opportunity. I do too before picking up any new job or any new assignment. I call my trusted advisor and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you feel? Do you have any advice for me? So sometimes it could even be a sibling or a parent or somebody in your family. But that mentorship and that advice is really important. Of course, I would say research is important, but there's so much information out there today that even qualifying that research and making it applicable to you as an individual for that interview becomes a core skill.
I agree completely. The life is not a linear topic.
Correct.
It's cyclic in nature, so you can't really move on and burn the bridges.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to keep on harnessing what you have developed over a period of time. You also touched upon a very important aspect of employers moving from CV-based interviews to more skill and behavioral interviews.
That's right.
It's very inspiring to see that Moss Adams has adopted this program where you are helping the candidates to know what to expect, what skills are there. So I'm sure that's a big value add for candidates in today's world.
That's true. That's true.
So Priya, like most things in life, irrespective of how one prepares, there will be situations which are unknown. So imagine a scenario for a candidate, one gets a very tough or unfavorable question. How do you think one should respond to that?
So Neelabh, tough or unfavorable is a matter of perspective, isn't it? Meaning something that is unfavorable or tough for you may not be for me. But I have seen that, any question to do with conflict, how have you handled conflict, or how have you managed any disagreements or challenges, tends to trip up candidates, right? So I would say if candidates are faced with certain situations like this, they should simply follow the STAR method, which is situation, task, action, result, right? The STAR method, even in their answers, because that makes it very simple, makes it very logical, and breaks it down in order to give a very, very structured answer to the interviewers.
That's correct, Priya. So Priya, what do recruiters look for in a candidate when they are interviewing somebody? Are these hard technical skills? Are these soft skills? What exactly is that the focus is on?
Yeah, thank you for the very important question. I think this is the foundation of all things recruiting right now. So if I look at it, I'll break it down and I'll just talk a little bit about what recruiters really look for. Okay, and I'll talk about it in a small little model, if you will allow me. It's called a 5C model, right? The 5C stands for character. C for character, which means how much integrity is the candidate showing, even in showing up for the interview. C for competence, your subject matter expertise, your technical skills. Are you showcasing your technical skills? Do you have enough of those skills to talk about, to actually demonstrate? That is the second C. Third is culture fit, which means is there a vibe match between what the firm wants and what the candidate really demands? That's the third piece. That is the culture fit. Fourth piece is the communication. How is the candidate able to communicate their thoughts? I think that's an important piece. You may be the technically most brilliant person around, but if you're not able to communicate, then the whole interview comes crashing down, right? Fifth and most importantly, career direction. Career direction meaning what does the candidate want to achieve out of the job? Where do they see their career going? Because if sometimes when we as recruiters sit in the interview and the candidate says, I'm coming into this job and I want to see my career going in a particular trajectory, and the firm does not have that trajectory, then there is no point in continuing that conversation, because every firm wants a candidate for the long haul. Nobody wants to have the candidate join for a year and say, okay, bye, and I'm leaving, right? So these 5 C's is something that we really look for, especially at Moss Adams. For us, these 5 C's are also very, very important, but more than anything else, are you confident? Most of the times, candidates seem very tentative in their approach when it comes to a particular question that they're not comfortable in. So I would add the 6th C, which is your confidence, right? So there's 5 C's, which is character, career direction, culture fit, competence, communication, and above all, your confidence as a candidate. So this is something that we look for at Moss Adams, India as well. We do competency-based interviewing. So yes, your competence in your subject matter expertise is important, is very important. That's the baseline. Once you cross that baseline, then we talk about the person as an individual. Who is Neelabh as an individual? What excites Neelabh? What motivates Neelabh? What are Neelabh's career goals? How does Neelabh communicate? I think if a lot of time is spent on assessing this, and of course we use the STAR methodology to make sure that we are capturing the answers in the appropriate format. This has served us well because we have a very good joiner ratio in Moss Adams India, and I think that's because we make sure a lot of time is spent on understanding the candidate or understanding the professional behind the person before we make a decision on hiring. So to your question on are hard skills important or soft skills important, there are no hard and soft skills anymore. Today, if you look at the skills that we have, even communication, it's not a soft skill anymore. Communication has become important in order to communicate what you do, right? In order to showcase what you do. Therefore, I would not differentiate between hard and soft skills. I would say these are required skills for any individual who's applying to a job or who wants to take up a job in an organization.
Makes sense, Priya. If I may add, on the candidate side, I think another important thing for the individual to do is to basically know oneself first before you show up. I think it is good to know what are the hard no's for you as an individual in a job. It is good to basically know that you do not want to, let's say, compromise on your shift timings. So it is good to know what are those hard no's, what are you looking for in a job, so that when one is interviewing, you are also evaluating at the same time whether it is a good fit for you or not. So I think that's a good thing, coupled with the 5C framework, and I think it shows in the joining ratios of Moss Adams. There is a good alignment between how you evaluate and what they end up doing once they show up at the door. So that's very encouraging to hear. So Priya, in this ever-evolving environment, skills are changing every day at the end of the day. So what's relevant today is not going to be relevant after, let's say, 3 months, 6 months. We covered some part of it. So what do you think are some of those top skills which you basically see will be important for next 4 or 5 years to come?
I would say we start with the digital skills, which is AI and, more importantly, data storytelling. Let me give you an example. All of us know that we can create as many reports and dashboards as possible, but we want data to be able to tell a story. We want data for decision making. That is going to become a crucial skill in the future, right? So digital skills is number one. Second is EI, which is emotional intelligence, and teaming. Closely linked to that is team skills, right? Are we emotionally intelligent to be able to work with each other? Are we able to, with the multi-generational workforce, handle conflict, handle challenges, able to learn from failures, able to manage failures? I think that has become even more important and is going to become even more important as a skill in the near future. So there's digital skills, there's EI and teaming. The third one, and you and I know in the fast-changing world, adaptability and change, managing change is going to become the next most important set of skills because things are changing at a pace that you and I can't keep pace up with, right? All right. And the last one is learning agility, right? What we learned 20 years ago is damn near obsolete right now. So if we don't spend time in actively learning the skills, right, in each of our specific fields, for me, it could be in the field of, say, coaching, or it could be in the field of, say, psychometric assessments as a leader, as a people leader. For you, it could be something else. But people have to identify what areas they want to learn in and spend time and effort in actually picking up those skills. So for me, these are the very, very important skills for the future. And most employers, including us, we are going to be looking for literacy across all of these 4 areas, demonstration of behaviors or demonstrational skills in some of these areas that I've just outlined for you.
So Priya, we have covered various aspects. We started with how should candidates prepare, what are the important skills and things like that, what are some of the good frameworks which are there for you to evaluate the candidates, what are some of the good frameworks for candidates to prepare for interviews. And as we come towards the end of this conversation, let's start with some of the lighter questions towards the end. So one of my favorite questions is that as an interviewer, if you had an opportunity to interview a renowned personality, 2 parts to the question. 1, who will be the personality? 2nd, what may be the opening question to the personality?
I must tell you that I get inspired by a lot of things, and the person that I chose to interview is this lady by the name Salu Marada Timmakka. She's a centurion, meaning she's over 100 years old, and she won the Padam Shri very recently for planting 8,000 trees and creating an ecosystem as an environmentalist. She's not educated, by the way, and considering the trees as her real source of inspiration. Creating an ecosystem, and really a lot of people speak about the environment and sustainability. She did the work. Wow. So one of the things that I would love to go and ask her is what inspires her, what motivates her. Imagine being not coming from a place of privilege like a lot of us, but still being able to make the real difference to the society. I think that's inspirational for me, and that's what I will ask her. That would be my question to Salumarada Timmakka.
Oh, very inspiring. Thanks, Priya. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you
so much. It has been a pleasure hearing the inspiring journey of yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Much gratitude.
To our audience, thanks for tuning in. Stay connected for such insightful conversations on Architects of Great Talent podcast.